and let us all do we can to build a better future.
A fight that's a brewing. Now, I don't know if any of you saw this on social media, but there is a large number of governors who are siding with the Texas governor, including Trump himself, in regards for the Texas National Guard securing the border. Now, there is a migrant crisis in this country. And the reason why there is a migrant crisis in the first place is it isn't just that one day people decide to wake up and become evildoers or act like Saturday morning cartoon villains. It's because of previous Democratic and Republican administrations that have been impacting the lives in Central and South America with coups, sanctions, regime change, wars, and of course the ridiculous war on drugs, which led to the cartel. Nobody look into why the CIA was involved. You know, the CIA that always gets hyped up in the Hollywood movies as a super secret intelligence organization that looks out for us because they got to stop the invisible bad guys. Even though, in reality, they've done some pretty shady stuff that makes them look like the bad guys. Dare I say, it kind of makes they are the bad guys. Yeah, no one look into how the CIA is close to the cartels. Nobody look into that. Nobody look into that, right? Because why bring that up? And of course, when you have drug lords and tyrants and dictators and gangs running amok, a rational person's going to look at this and say, geez, I'm out of my element here. I am severely overpowered. I think I need to get up and run, which is what any person would do. Yours truly as well. But because of that, there's a crisis. And it's led to the migrant crisis here in the city of Chicago and with sanctuary cities. So much more that at this point, look, sanctuary cities, it sounds nice on paper. It truly does. But the cities and those who advocated for cities to be sanctuary cities, you didn't have the resources or infrastructure necessary to take care of people. And when myself and my colleague Daniel asked this of all the activists and people who were suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, we were vilified as bad guys. And now it's happening. The Texas governor is taking the initiative of securing the border. So let's go ahead and play this video. And so far, these are all the states that have signed on board and showed solidarity and support with Texas and its decision. Now, I'm not a fan of the big action movie kind of stuff that you see in the trailers, but okay, let's talk about it. What's happening here? Texas governor defies Biden. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has refused to back down in his border security role with U.S. President Joe Biden's administration, arguing that regardless of this week's Supreme Court ruling in Washington's favor, his duty is to protect his constituents supersedes any federal laws. So Governor Abbott issued a statement 2 days after the Supreme Court ruled that federal border agents must be allowed to remove the concreta, a wire that the state had installed to prevent illegal aliens from crossing its border. The dispute escalated earlier this month when the Texas National Guard seized control of the park at a key border crossing point and blocked federal officers from accessing the site. The federal government has broken the compact between the United States and the states. Governor Abbott said on Wednesday, the executive branch of the United States has a constitutional duty to enforce federal laws protecting states, including immigration laws on the books right now. President Biden has refused to enforce those laws and has even violated them. Abbott claimed that more than 6 million illegal aliens have crossed into the U.S. since Biden took office 3 years ago, exceeding the populations of all but 17 states, causing unprecedented harm to the people across the United States. The federal government's failure to fulfill its constitutional duty has triggered a constitutional right of self-defense reserved to the state, he added. I have already declared an invasion to invoke Texas constitutional authority to defend and protect itself, the Republican governor said. That authority is the supreme law of the land and supersedes any federal statutes to the contrary. So Texas National Guard and state troopers will continue working to secure the border based on the state's right to defend itself in lieu of the federal government doing its job, Governor Abbott said. The Texas Military Department, which includes the state's National Guard units, issued a statement on Tuesday pledging to hold the line to prevent illegal crossings. We remain resolute in our actions to secure our border, preserve the rule of law, and protect the sovereignty of our state. So Texas is doing this, which then leads to Donald Trump. Trump's push to deny Biden's border victory aggravates lawmakers. Former President Trump pushed to kill the border deal in order to deny President Biden a legislative win is upsetting members on both sides of the aisle as negotiators hope to wrap up work on an agreement within days. Trump had been the sleeping giant in the background of talks, but his recent wins in Iowa and New Hampshire, and yes, it's going to be very hilarious to see him win in South Carolina against Nikki, that's not her name, Haley, coupled with his recent remarks calling for Republicans to oppose any border package short of House Resolution 2, have complicated the path for the Senate. Lawmakers say they are worried that killing the deal would be a major disservice given the situation at the border and in Ukraine, because we got to give money to Ukraine. How many billions of dollars went to this war now already? There has to be a ceasefire. If politics get in the way of this, if Donald Trump, who wants to help his friend, Russian President Vladimir Putin, because Putin's somewhere in the background, woogie boogie boogie, with Ukraine and wants to keep the border alive as a major issue, if that prevails, that would already be a horrible disposition to all of this. It's Senator Debbie Sambrow, Democrat from Michigan. So, of course, you're going to have a Democrat say Trump's helping Putin. Somehow Putin's involved in everything. The economy sucks, it's Putin's fault. If there's a hole in the road, it's Putin's fault. The bridge collapsed, oh, it's Putin's fault. Lead in your drinking water, that's Putin's fault. Did you stub your toe? That's Putin's fault. You spent your last $10 on stuff that you didn't need? That's Putin's fault. Everything's Putin's fault. He's the invisible boogeyman. Things ain't going your way, it's Putin's fault. Senator Mitt Romney called the effort appalling. Romney, listen, baby, hold on. Romney, we need to talk. Romney, if you think the internet forgot your face in 2016 and in 2017 was you sitting at that dinner table as Trump, looking like a simp, looking like a cuck, Romney, don't act tough, okay? You're not doing yourself any favors whatsoever. Don't make Trump embarrass you again, okay? I'm trying to do you a favor, Romney. Trying to do you a favor. Continuing on, but the reality is that we have a crisis at the border. The American people are suffering as a result of what's happening at the border, and someone running for president ought to try to get the problem solved as opposed to saying, hey, save that problem. Don't solve it. Let me take credit for solving it later. Well, yeah, that's Trump. Why are you surprised by this, Senator Romney? Maybe politics isn't your thing. And hey, everybody, Hillary Clinton's VP pick. Tim Kaine weighed in. However, believes it could backfire on the former president and cause some resentment among Senate Republicans who are interested in backing the eventual deal. He doesn't need them. The Senate, listen, the Republican voting base wants Trump. And the Senate Republicans, they had their hopes pinned on people who just didn't have what it takes. Ron DeSantis, Vivek, Chris Christie, and now what, Nikki Haley? No, none of those people, even Mike Pence. Mike Pence was their ace in the hole. They didn't stand a chance. This Republican primary was filled with weak people. The ones in 2016 at least had some kind of stamina, and that's not saying much because he had weak Jeb, little boy Jeb, and all those other jagoffs. Border negotiations have been ongoing since before Thanksgiving, but they had high gear in mid-December once the White House and Biden administration officials got involved, something Senator James Lankford publicly asked for earlier. That's pushed the battle into the heart of the Republican primary season. With the bill on the verge of completion and Trump on the verge of defeating former South Carolina Governor Nikki, that's not her name, Haley, the former president's conservative allies in the Senate are effectively attempting to kill the border package, which would also seriously endanger any future aid for Ukraine. So that's what's happening. I also want to pull this up here as well, because now there's also talk of civil war. Why do people want civil war? You know, listen, my fellow Americans, and in the off chance I got people from all 50 states watching me. Listen, your neighbor isn't your enemy. We all have disagreements politically, socially, economically, spiritually, psychologically, whatever. We all have disagreements. But the problem in this country isn't the guy or gal on the street trying to get on by. It's the people in Washington, D.C., the swamp bubble, okay? Don't defend these politicians. Don't go to bat for them, okay? So Civil War 2.0. What's behind the latest escalation between Washington and the great state of Texas? Texas, don't mess with it. An escalating feud between U.S. President Joe Biden and Texas Governor Greg Abbott over the country's border crisis emerged as a major test of where federal authority ends and when a state can defend its own interests, not unlike the impasse that triggered the American Civil War in the 19th century. At issue is Abbott's deployment of the National Guard soldiers and state troopers to stop a stream of illegal aliens flooding into Texas in defiance of federal jurisdiction over border enforcement. The state troops seized control of a park on the Texas-Mexico boundary earlier this month, blocking U.S. Border Patrol officers from accessing the site and stringing concrete wire to seal off a popular crossing point for illegal immigrants. Biden's administration won a U.S. Supreme Court ruling on Monday upholding the right of federal authorities to dismantle the border barriers put up by the state. Abbott set down his battle lines on Wednesday, announcing that Texas will continue to defy Biden on the border security, regardless of the court ruling, because the federal government has its constitutional duty to defend the states. In lieu of Washington fulfilling its obligations, the governor claimed the state's right to self-defense supersedes all federal laws. So at the heart of it, there's talk of foreign invasion, the numbers. The Border Patrol agents encountered more than 300,000 illegal immigrants crossing into the U.S. in December. That's an all-time high. Of course, you got Biden's little conundrum. Biden, who, again, by the way, folks, the kids are still in cages. No one wants to talk about that. And a historical perspective. The Arkansas desegregation battle is perhaps the best and most recent historic precedent for a state trying to defy Washington's authority in the matter of a federal jurisdiction. Previous cases include an effort by Kentucky to nullify a 1798 law that enabled the government to deport aliens deemed a threat to national security. South Carolina passed a state law in 1832 trying to nullify federal tariffs that were disproportionately burdensome to southern states. The states lost those battles. In the South Carolina case, U.S. President Andrew Jackson, remember him? Yeah, Andrew Jackson, threatened to send in federal troops if the state refused to comply with the federal law. Disunion by armed force is treason, he wrote. He almost sounds like Palpatine. Are you really ready to incur this guilt? A compromise was reached a year later when the federal government tweaked its tariffs and the state repealed its legislation. So what's going to happen next? Well, obviously, this is going to be a huge political issue. And knowing how the sanctuary cities are struggling just to make ends meet, how the sanctuary cities are being burdened by a lot of migrants, this is going to be gaining more and more favor amongst people who see the entire crisis happening at the border as another important issue that's going to take front and center for the 2024 election cycle. And I could say this with enough confidence that Trump is very well likely to secure the nomination for the 2024 Republican primary. And as it stands right now, unless something else crazy happens, Biden is going to secure the nomination for the Democratic primary. I know if that upsets people, or if I'm being too premature with that assessment, well, too bad. Spoiler alerts. I read the script in advance. I think it's too late for anyone to make any kind of edit to the script already. It's going to be Trump versus Biden. I'm so sorry if anyone had any other high hopes. If you want to save yourself from mental anguish, consider supporting independent or third party, or you could choose not to vote at all. That will be your decision. But let's talk about the border. What's happening there? This is ongoing, continuous policies from previous Democratic and Republican presidential administrations that profited off of the war on drugs, which helped create the prison industrial complex. This is also the responsibility of previous Democratic and Republican lawmakers that allowed coups and regime change wars and sanctions to take place in Central and South America, causing further political, economic, and social instability in those said regions, in those said countries. Of course, there's going to be a mass migration. If there's violence, if you're dealing with forces that you yourself can't deal with, a rational person will want to seek safer ground. Unfortunately, coming here, going through hell, an arduous march, these same migrants find themselves in another kind of hell, where they're being used as political pawns between Democratic and Republican politicians. You have the Democratic politicians saying they care about migrants and the kids in cages, even though after Biden got elected, they did nothing to, get those kids out of cages. And then have sanctuary cities take up the burden. Unfortunately, sanctuary cities and those who fought for it take the L on this one because the cities can't do it. Here in Chicago, we have an economic crisis. The city can't afford it. And now there's a conflict between the city of Chicago, Mayor Brandon Johnson, and the governor of the state, Governor J.B. Pritzker. And now they're talking about building the migrant shelters outside of Chicago. I'm pretty sure a lot of cities and towns and counties in Illinois are not going to be a fan of that. People are being used as pawns. And now you have a whole group of governors, Republican governors, siding with the governor of Texas. Say it with me, folks, for the people in the back. What could possibly go wrong? And Trump adding fuel to the fire is already going to give him more political ammunition. This administration, the Biden-Harris administration, has failed to follow through with its promise to return the soul back to America. Unfortunately, there was nothing to return back to. This country is struggling. This country has failure of leadership. And who in their right mind really sees Biden as the big dog to challenge Governor Abbott or even Trump? He doesn't know where he's at. He's constantly being interrupted. He's constantly being called out. These politicians, they want to play this game. Do I see this escalating any further? Hopefully not to the point to where you have a real civil war, because then I'm going to be ticked off if I'm driving down the street one day and there's a roadblock and I see a guy in some nice fancy glasses saying, "Hey, Kid Cabello, what kind of American are you?" I'm an American that wants to go to the grocery store. Get out of my way. Anyways, that's what's happening. Our politicians are playing this game. We have a border crisis and it's escalating. The government wants to enforce the law. They're saying to Texas to obey it, but Texas isn't going to back down. And I think from my fair share of knowing people from Texas, covering topics and issues from Texas, if you want to go to Texas and F around and find out, you will find out. Because this border crisis is getting out of control, and the way people, especially in my city, are being vocal about the migrant centers and the overall fact that the city can't afford it anymore, there's going to be more people speaking out. If this isn't resolved, emotions are going to intensify.